All right, welcome to this episode of the Tale of Two AIs podcast. I'm really excited to have Ben Miller as our guest today. Ben is the director of applied AI at Forian, which is an innovative health tech company that provides data and analytics to clients in order for them to optimize clinical, operational, and financial performance. I've known Ben for a number of years through Natiza and over time, just interacting and being in the same space. But more recently, we started collaborating between Forian and FeatureByte. And I've got to know Ben even better and some of his background, which is really amazing. Ben is an applied data scientist, business consultant, is leader with 20 years building AI systems that actually move the needle for the business. And he's been doing this for more than a decade now, at least that I know, and even longer, I'm sure. Ben has worked across healthcare, banking, biotech, media, even sports, delivering AI initiatives that actually move the needle for the business. So there's, just millions in ROI, large scale production system, just decision intelligence embedded directly into the business. His background is super interesting. He's gone from like cancer assay development and liquid biopsies to enterprise AI platforms generating hundreds of millions in value. So there's going to be a super interesting perspective that we're going to get from Ben on deep scientific rigor combined with real world execution. So this is it's not a hype conversation. This is all about applied AI, how it works, how to make it work, and why so much of AI is really not so much applied today. So Ben, great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to jump right in. And, as I was mentioning, you've got a very unique and amazing background. You've done cancer research, nanoreactors, and now getting into enterprise AI. I'm really curious, what's the through line that connects those worlds together? How do you go from being a chemist and a chemical engineer to doing data science and banking and healthcare and all that?
Yeah, I think the through line for me, there's a couple things that are constant throughout my entire career. One is I was always interested in kind of the bleeding edge of what's possible. So there was interest in science and R&D, data science throughout. But mostly I was interested in solving problems. Mm-hmm. And the problems that were in front of me, I always took maybe a slightly different approach. And I do remember this is just in my first job as a chemist coming out of school. I was in the lab doing the work, and I'm in front of the instrumentation, and I'm writing stuff down in the notebook. And I'm going, this is all just data. Why am I writing this down and going back to my computer, typing it up? I said, well, let me see if I can figure out how to automate all of the data transfer and the data processing that I have in this system. And this is mid 2000s when I'm doing this. And I remember my boss, he's like, what are you doing? Why are you spending all your time in front of code? And I said, well, so I had to hide it. But I knew it was right, Razi. I knew what I was doing was right. So fast forward to the end of it, what would normally take me 4 hours to do reports at the beginning of the day, after about a year of all the coding, debugging, and all that stuff, I would press a button. All my reports would be done within about 15 minutes. So I would get in at 8, about 8:15, 8:30. I would hand in my reports to my boss, never made a mistake. And he's like, what? So he finally relented and said, okay, I get it. I understand what you're doing. So for me, solving a problem, automation, what's possible, how can I do this better? And there's also like a slight bit of laziness in that too, is I don't really.
I think every good engineer is a little lazy, right?
Yeah. And then, as I moved on as a scientist in, cancer research and doing, I had a chance to work with some of the best and the brightest folks all over the world. And I had a little bit of I had to prove something because I was working with all these PhDs from all over the world. I'm like, I can hang with these folks. And I started to solve problems. I have tons of inventions in, pressure-driven microfluidics, nanoreactors, digital PCR space. And to this day, liquid biopsies are more and more important now for understanding how you're responding to cancer treatment. So, for instance, if you have a cancer that has metastasized, they will do a blood draw and understand the count of circulating tumor cells in your blood. And if you're taking a medication, it lets you know in pretty much real time whether or not you're responding to that medication. And this has been quite transformative in the way that people care for cancer. So this R&D that I was doing, 15, 20 years ago is now part of, the protocols that people
Amazing.
use today.
Yeah.
So that's been great. How I went into kind of the machine learning part of this was I stumbled upon a problem in digital PCR space that I couldn't solve with regular math. And it was I stumbled upon something called logistic regression. And I know for any data scientist who's listening here, maybe that's your first lesson in data science. But I saw that and I was this light bulb moment where I said, wait a minute, I can teach the computer how to solve these problems for me.
Right.
I'm like, this is what I want to do. And then I absorbed everything I could. I think I took 25 online classes from Coursera. They didn't even have this in college. You know what I mean? This was, I took all of these courses from Stanford and Coursera and Johns Hopkins and MIT. I did some stuff at Harvard. I just absorbed all I could from the best and the brightest in this space. And then I got a call from a recruiter at Data Robot. And then I spent, 6 years at Data Robot and learned from, you and the rest of the organization and Sergey at FeatureByte and Zach Mayer and these folks that were just like off the charts when it comes to data science and applied AI. So that's kind of my through line, how I got to here.
Yeah, it's about problem solving, right? Curiosity. I mean, those are the things that I'm hearing. And just having that rigor, I think, is super important as well when it comes to data science. So do you miss the days of research and working on, actually saving lives than just generating value? Just curious.
I do. I really, truly do. There's always been a part of me that wanted to kind of marry that back, where, what I could have done as a, bioinformatician would have been fantastic to go into that direction. But applied AI has been really great for me. And the challenges in this space are also more than enough to fuel me kind of daily. I get pretty excited about what I get to do.
Yeah.
But I do miss it. I used to play basketball, I miss that. There's so many things that we only have so much time in the day to do these things. So, yeah.
And priorities change over time, right? Priorities change over time. So, Ben, when did you realize that, the success with AI was more about decision making than just business outcomes and modeling? Like, well, you worked in so many different industries with big companies, small companies. I mean, what's common across all of those, different organizations?
I think this was just, I think this was just embedded in me. I think from day one, the first job I had as a data scientist, I wanted to produce an output that was valuable for the organization. I remember the first project that I had to do was something called a digital fingerprint. And we were looking at, 90 million LinkedIn records. And for every single person, you included, I had this fingerprint that would say, what is the percentage of time that you spend in these parts of a business? Sales and marketing, IT, engineering, R&D, and everyone would have a fingerprint. And then what we would be able to do is group like-minded individuals via their fingerprint for us to kind of categorize and use this as useful information for this company called Bedrock Business Media. So kind of from day one, I was not a noodler. I wasn't just trying to build models for the sake of building models. I didn't like reading research papers. I didn't care for that. I'm like, if I had to learn something, I'm going to learn it to figure it out, to solve the problem. So for me, it was always, maybe it's an engineering mindset, but I think from day one, I don't think I've ever been different there. I remember talking to a person, Jonathan Rothberg started a lot of biotech companies, and he had one of his AI scientists hiring for a position. And I remember reaching out to him and he goes, I want all of my AI scientists to read this paper and I want them to code up a random forest on their own and build, gradient descent, algorithm to kind of fit for it. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. But I would rather see them use a data robot or use, another tool that was out there and available to kind
Right.
of accelerate the problem and
Or at least
solve the
use
problem. So
libraries that already exist, right? Instead of
yeah,
having to code
exactly.
stuff all the way from scratch. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I read a lot about like experimental and theoretical physics,
Yeah.
and there's kind of the theoretical physicists that all the experimental folks are built on the backs of those people, and I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
I'm an experimental person. I'm an R&D. I've always been that way, and I'm building my career off the backs of those folks and trusting that they did it
Yeah.
properly,
Yeah.
and it's been good for me. So yeah, so for day one for me, it's always been that way.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So is that really what applied AI is about? Everyone talks about applied AI. And, how do you think about applied and like what disqualifies or, just you would put in the more experimental category rather than
Yeah.
applied?
Yeah, so I'll go back to when I was at United Technology, the aerospace systems, and I was in human resources as a data scientist. My career has gone everywhere. And this
Yeah.
one, I was building a churn model for a pilot churn model on 5% of the organization. And the applied portion of that was that we were actually making these predictions, understanding what was driving those predictions, and then influencing the outreach that we would do to these employees to
Hmm.
help them stay. Like, for instance, we understood if their commute was challenging, and some of the interventions that we would have is hybrid remote work. We were really early on with hybrid remote work, or even
Interesting.
flexible schedules, allowing people to miss kind of the miserable part of the commute. Understanding, I think like 16 or 17 aspects of this. And the program actually saved about 120 jobs in the first year. And that in dollar value is pretty good. When you start to understand what it costs to rehire and backfill, it ended up being $5 million was the
Wow.
estimated
Nice.
savings in year one. So applied AI is something that allows you an output from these AI systems that facilitate making a better decision for your business. So that's an example of that. Something that isn't applied AI, I think, is where you're spending all this time and you never even get to the starting line. You never get something deployed, even if it's a garbage model. Deploy it and get that feedback loop in there. Start building and understanding where you're making mistakes. Take a couple risks there. But if you never, you know, there's a number of folks in the current job that I do, when we talk to them, they move so slowly and they need everything to absolutely be perfect.
Yeah.
All the back testing needs to be fully documented before they make a decision.
Yeah.
But the error that you're getting there doesn't warrant that kind of conservative approach. There's
Yeah.
just too much noise for you to then turn it on, get a wrong answer, and then expect the answer to be somewhere in what you missed in the back. And so
Yeah, it's so
I think,
situational, right? It's for certain types of use cases, for certain applications, you want that certainty. You want you want that rigor, and you want to have tested the thing like 10 times before you put it in production. But the
I'll
real
give you an
world,
example of that one.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So the example is the one we did at Bank of America, which was like an automated foreign exchange. And this problem was
I
awesome for
remember
me
that one.
because it was mutually beneficial for the business and for the customer. So for instance, if a payment emanated from the US and it went to a foreign beneficiary, the model would predict the probability that the recipient of the payment wanted it in local currency.
Mm.
And if it was above like 97.97, the probability, Bank of America would make that conversion for them automatically at a lower basis point exchange rate. So for them, instead of paying 400 basis points, they were paying 125 or 200 basis points. And for them, that's money that actually is safe for them. Plus, there's no headache of them saying, oh, I got my money in US dollars. I want it in euros.
Right.
I now have to go and run through some paperwork or a bit of a headache or talk to the bank. So there's time. But that one required much deliberation. I think it took about 3 years to launch that. So that one,
Interesting.
understandably,
Yeah.
it makes sense to go
Yeah.
slow. But you're right. Yeah, it's situational for sure.
Yeah. Big dollars, big potential for things going wrong. You got to be super, super rigorous. Right. So, one thing as you were talking about applied AI, there's always like a business outcome or some kind of a dollar value that's tied to it, right?
Mhm.
That's what I'm getting from the examples that you cited. So, but it's for especially for data science teams and for data scientists, it's challenging sometimes to get to the business value.
Yeah.
All right, how do
Yeah.
you work through that? Why is it important? I mean, I feel like that's such an important skill, but it's still so lacking for a lot of just technical teams in general, but data scientists because they live at the sort of the border of science and value. I think it's a really important skill to have.
Yeah, it's something I still struggle with. I think you to get executive buy-in, to manage expectations, to properly communicate. I think there's, especially at the advent of predictive AI and auto ML and the advent of Gen AI, there's kind of a mismatch in the expectations from leadership and what it would actually take to produce something of value. So being able to communicate that appropriately is difficult. I still struggle with this, and this is probably one of the aspects of applied AI that is probably the most frustrating for me is having conversations with leaders and others and trying to get buy-in. I mean, I remember working on a fraud case with Truist, where after 1 week of experimentation on 5 days of history, the model didn't work, and the leader threw out all the work that we did, and wrote a pretty nasty note, to the
Huh.
organization saying, we don't want to go and do this. We're okay with, the default rate and the fraud rate that we're seeing right now. We're going to continue to build our rules. They had like thousands of rules that they had to
Sure.
follow before.
Yeah.
And it just fell backwards to me. And I couldn't articulate that. And
Mm.
so I've had many struggles there. It's probably something that I don't know if I'm ever going to crack that nut. The only way I think to get there is to have kind of a track record as an
Right.
organization, as a person, of bringing value, and then hoping you can build a little bit of trust within an
Right.
organization
Right.
to get there. It's still tough, but making sure that people who don't necessarily understand it don't have
Yeah.
the mindset to. It's not. It's a mindset shift. It's not an intelligence level. It's nothing like that. But it's just a mindset to think like
Yeah.
an AI engineer, understand that we're in an exponential growth phase in AI rather than a linear growth phase or a static growth phase. Understanding that, taking a couple lumps along the way, but I think the ones who take the biggest risk in AI here are the ones who are going to come out on the other side well ahead of the people who don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just communications and just sometimes you got to just put yourself out there, and not every single one of these pitches is going to be successful. I mean, I've been doing this for such a long time. I still, I see like getting in front of some of the executives. Sometimes they've already made up their mind, and you can
Yeah.
show them all kinds of proof points and, you know, get the teams lined up to say, yes, this is fantastic. And, you can show the ROI right clearly, just what it means for
Yeah.
their organization. And they're still not convinced. And, it's
Yeah.
sometimes I scratch my head as well, but, you know, that's, but just the way AI is going, that's what's going to separate the folks who just
Yeah.
jump in and adopt versus the ones that are, remain skeptical and feel like being fast followers is going to be good enough. Uh,
Yeah. I think there's also an aspect of building the right personnel to get there. I think engineering is more important than, theoretical expertise in this
yeah,
space. I am less concerned whether you know why, an individual tree in a random forest is decorrelated. I don't care. but I want people to understand that there's a tool and show me the results.
Yeah.
So I lean more towards the folks who are problem solvers and engineers, an engineering mindset.
Yeah.
I know I went to school for engineering, but I was a scientist for a long time. I kind of learned and took a little bit of all of that in there, but applied AI to me means, an application that changes a business trajectory for the good. And I really look for people who have demonstrated that in the past. And I stay away from what I call the noodlers.
Yeah.
Those are the people that.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned, it's, just there's a clear sort of, dotted line and a connection between the work that's being done from a data science perspective and the business outcome. Anyone that can, make that relationship and correlation obvious, I think that's gold. That's really ultimately what's going to drive AI success.
Yeah, I wish I was better at that part. That is, if I can
but I think
galvanize folks around that, it would be fantastic. I'm not great at it.
Yeah. So, you were talking about teams. I want to get into how you think about scaling teams, and especially AI in the enterprise. There's so much consternation, I think, amongst data scientists as well as just data professionals in general on how the role of data professionals, especially data scientists, is evolving in this new AI era, right? So I'm curious, as you're building teams now, what are, must-have skills for data scientists in the coming years? Should everyone become AI engineers, or how do you see the world?
Yeah, I think the number one skill that I look for is adaptability. Someone who can learn something and then turn around and understand in unique and creative ways how to apply that. I am a buy versus build person. I believe that there's tech out there that helps to kind of facilitate and accelerate problem solving within a business. Just as an aside, we had, as I wrapped up the proof of concept with FeatureByte, I went around the rest of the organization and presented the results. And there was an engineer who said, well, we can build this stuff on our own. And I remember Jeff pinged me off to the side and he said, there's no way, it's going to take you years and years to rebuild this and get to the level. We're talking about some of the best data scientists data scientists to ever walk the planet building software. And you're telling me that you're going to go build it on your own. So I'm a buy versus build, kind of person. So I look for people who
code this shit.
No, there's no way. And, so for me, it's like finding people who are adaptable, experimental. Maybe it's kind of a bias in the way that I think and the way that I see the world is I like to run a little bit faster, and I'm going to trip and fall a bunch of times.
Yeah.
But I'm always confident that I can get up and keep moving. But I guarantee I'm going to run faster than you because I am using the best tech, the best stack in the world to help me get it done. I'm filling in the gaps, things that I'm not good at with this tech. And that to me is what I look for when I build a team, is people who are really adaptable, quick learning curves, problem solvers, curious, experimental, but also people who take risks. I struggle with the mindset of, a very conservative approach to business and a very conservative approach to applied AI. I struggle with that. I always think we can move fast, break a couple things, make some mistakes, learn from that, build these loops, these recursive loops that learn and get better.
Right.
And I'm quite convinced of that. So when I build a team, I look for folks who are like that. But not everybody should be an AI engineer. You do need high quality engineers to create, the high quality data that goes into these systems, whether it's, unstructured data or structured data. It all requires high quality systems. You need engineers who understand how to put all these pieces together. don't care about, whether or not you understand ML at all, but engineering to put the plumbing together to make these systems work. So
Yeah.
I think the team is very technical. I tend to lean in that direction. Hope the other
Yeah.
parts of the organization can handle the marketing and the sales and the business development,
Yeah.
etc.
No, even as I look at, getting people on board, whether it's for, technical reasons or for technical roles or business roles, I'm constantly looking for people who are not afraid to take risks,
Yeah.
right? We're curious. There's just so much information. Everything is so much easier now compared to, 10 years ago. You can just
Yeah.
ask ChatGPT, get all kinds of interesting answers. You get, you're saving so much time, even if you want to do something completely new. The place where you're starting is just so much better. I mean, think 20, 30 years ago, you had to go to the library to look through
Yeah.
books to understand where to even start. Then with the internet, that all was at your fingertips in some ways. And now the answers are all there, right?
Yeah.
And so for folks who can, just jump in, figure out, okay, well, I'm not afraid to try out a new tool or take a, quick YouTube micro learning course or whatever it might be just to get started, I think
Yeah.
is going to be super, super critical. So that adaptability, curiosity, those are the kinds of
Yeah.
things are
Yeah.
going to be
Yeah. Growth
way
mindset,
more
someone
than
who wants to learn.
what skills you bring to the table, right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
we were talking earlier about just the scientific process and the fact that data science is very rigorous. I'm curious, like, how do you maintain that rigor when speed and ROI pressures are just always there? And I'm also thinking about a conversation that I had with a data science leader who's okay, well, I'm getting all these new graduates coming out of school who have data science degrees, but they have such short attention spans that I'm concerned about how much rigor they're bringing to the table, and in some cases they don't even know how to sort of evaluate these models because they're all about, okay, well, let's get something built and deploy, because it's on the other end of
Yeah.
the spectrum of
Yeah, for sure.
running so fast that you're just breaking things, you're not actually building anything.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, I'm from a different generation than the newer folks coming out, but I do have kids and I do understand, attention and how much attention, a younger generation has. Kind of just off the cuff thinking about this out loud. One of the things that I would do for them is to allow them to understand that some of the tech that's out there has some of the guardrails already built in. And so if you want to go fast, if you go fast on your own, you are guaranteed to make mistakes. You're going to overfit. You're going to have some leakage. You're going to have, you're going to deploy something, and all of a sudden a regime is going to change and it's not going to work.
Right.
All of these things, you're not going to have the proper governance. But there's tools out there that can help you build and execute safely. And I think from the feature engineering and the feature side, I think FeatureByte has that built in. So some of those guardrails, that's what I look for. And if I was working with a team, if you want to go fast, here's the way to do it. These are the guardrails. These are the things that you don't have to think about, because maybe you don't have the capacity to put all of these thoughts in your head, or maybe you don't have the wisdom and the experience to recognize how they hurt if you don't do them properly.
Right.
So for me, it goes back to using the best tech and finding things that have those guardrails built in. Like, for instance, we had a customer who was wondering how we did the back testing for some of the models that we have here. And some of the tech that I use it has built-in stacked predictions, which allows you to kind of, with a few lines of code, produce back tests that are fully out of sample. And I'm like, this is having to do that on your own is difficult. And understanding why that's valuable is something that I think is very difficult for new grads to kind of understand. So having those guardrails built in with tech is probably how I would allow them to still go fast.
Yeah.
And trust, what they're doing. So for me, it's that.
Yeah.
But I also kind of embrace it because I guarantee you, Razi, that these new kids who are coming out see the world differently than us, understand that the world is
Yeah.
changing,
Yeah.
and they understand better than we do what is potentially possible with kind of a new thought, a new brain, a new
Yeah.
set of
Just a
folks
way
who
of
think
thinking.
differently.
Right. Yeah.
So they're gonna break ground in something that you and I won't even think of.
Yeah.
So like you said in the beginning, you still want people to take risks. These folks are going to take risks. Let them take some swings. You might be surprised. They're going to make a boatload of mistakes.
Oh
We all
yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're gonna surprise you.
Yeah. And I think, what you just kind of described is the right way to think about it, which is it's not about forcing them to learn the methods that were applicable 15 years ago, but it's much more about using the right tools that are more in line with the way they think and work, right? That's the only way to make them successful, because otherwise it's like, well, I'm not going to learn something that, my, I don't know, 2 generations ago was the right way to go about it, right?
Yeah. I think this is a mindset that luckily I have. It's something that, much to like the chagrin of friends and family, like everything that I do, if it's music, I like new music. I don't like old music. If it's tech, I like new tech. It's something I'm always kind of, all the books I read are like,
you're looking at
what's happening, what's going to happen tomorrow.
Right. You're looking
and
ahead.
You wonder why you got into applied AI, because it, helps to kind of see how you can figure out what's going to happen tomorrow.
So, talking about what's coming next and looking over the horizon, right? Everybody, whether they're technical, whether they're engineers, data scientists, business people, whoever it might be, they're all talking about agents, right? And what agentic AI is going to mean for business in the next, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. How are you guys thinking about agents at Forian? Where do you see agentic AI kind of adding value in enterprise decision systems? Thoughts on that?
Yeah. So how I use agentic AI right now is I use it to help me with some of the aspects of my job that I'm not necessarily good at. 2 of them are bug finding, bug fixes, and the other one is quality control. So I have a few agents that actually can take control of a browser for the application, and I'll give it a set of instructions and say, click around.
Yeah.
Figure out if there's a bug. Understand the code base that I have, and then make recommendations as to where the problem is and what could be those fixes. So those agents, it's still in R&D, and I ran them a few times and they've been pretty successful. One of the things is my context window for what the agent can do is too big. So I have to kind of shrink that down and still kind of work through that. But that's on bugs. And I think the acceleration of bug fixing and getting these agents acclimated to the code base is helpful there. I think it'll speed up the process. It still needs a tremendous amount of oversight, which I think I give it. The other one is quality control. It's underlying data, understanding and doing quality control checks with these agents. So these agents will generate, code and spit out a report for quality control. Really simple stuff, Razi, that I don't want to spend 20, 30 minutes writing brand new code or trying to find or port some other code over there. So I'm using these agents for quality control. So input data, quality control, bugs, bug fixes, understanding the code base and things like that. So it's really kind of personal to what I'm working on.
Right.
For the rest of the organization, I haven't given it a ton of thought, but what I would say is that with agents, I think as people get more and more acclimated to using LLMs, understanding that, oversight is key, context windows are really important, understanding that the output that you get is non-deterministic, could have some noise to it, but like you said earlier, gets you, 95% of the way to an answer.
Right.
That needs to be taken into consideration. I think folks who are trying to do too many big things with agents maybe making mistakes. Agents for me are these micro projects that
Yeah.
you need, almost as if I had a team of assistants.
Right.
I would say,
Right.
okay, go click around the application and find all the bugs, document them,
Yeah.
create Jira tickets. This agent does all of
Right.
that. So
Yeah. It's all these micro and nano services, and you still have
yeah,
to architect them all together into a more complex system.
yes,
I think some of the mistakes, like you were describing, people are trying to do is they're expecting, agents to basically just understand what the entire process is and solve it in one shot or zero shot.
yeah,
Yeah, that just is not going to work.
yeah. One of the things I think about with kind of LLMs and agents is you kind of led into it a little bit. Um, I think one of the things that some of these ChatGPT, OpenAI, Anthropic, they're all trying to create these massive models that do everything.
Yeah,
And it kind of reminds me of a CPU versus a GPU. And I think these little micro agents as an analog would be like the GPUs,
GPUs. Yeah,
understanding that
yeah,
these little agents can do so many things. That information could get fed into kind of
right,
a master model that can help triage this information. But if we're going to get to, AGI,
yeah,
it's going to be done via a network of agents that all communicate with each other and are experts in specific areas. I think if you look at how the brain works and you see how it lights up when there's a memory or when there's
right,
aggression or when there's this, I think agents are going to be very similar. Human resources agents that do there's going to be like 50 agents that
right.
all talk to each other and serve this information up there. So it's going to be a network of these that I think gets you to a real solution that is Gen AI, with
Yeah,
really strong intelligence. But a single model that does everything, I think, is the wrong approach.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. And I mean, that's kind of how, even if you look at any organization today, that's
Yeah,
how those organizations are structured, right? It's not
yeah,
just one person or one group doing everything. It's just, different teams and different people having different expertise that all kind of network and come together to solve a way bigger problem that any one of them can individually go off and do, right? So
100%.
it's maybe a mimic of the real world and
I
just
think
how
that's a
the
good
real world
point.
works.
Yeah. And, working with people, showing them what's possible with agents is leading hopefully more people to these smaller, lower risk agents
Yeah,
that can help with specific small context window purposes, things
right.
like that. Yeah,
And then evolve over time into doing something that's much more complex than
correct.
individual agents can go off and do. So, talking about agents, I mean, this is a topic that's close to my heart, but I want to get your thoughts on like how the relationship between structured data and agents in classical ML. Are we underestimating in some ways the need for structured data and just predictive AI in the sort of almost tunnel vision focus on agents and LLMs?
Yeah,
How do you think about that?
I think it's a mistake. I think structured data with predictive AI gives you deterministic outcomes that you can track and leverage for purposes there. I still think the Gen AI isn't deterministic enough and has a different set of purposes. I think it's, the first time you opened up Chat GPT, I did the same thing too. I'm like, this is amazing. I
Yeah,
actually asked that, I said, can you build me an ARIMA model to model out the next 3 months of revenue for this, blah, 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 whatever
yeah,
it was. And they ended up building a pretty crappy model, but it did it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So I was, it was kind of in a honeymoon phase for that. But the more I started to use it, the less I felt like I can let the reins go on
yeah,
Gen AI. So I think we're kind of in that, I don't want to say it's like the trough of disillusionment, but there's in the hype curve, we're a little bit lower, at least I would say with Gen AI.
yeah,
And the problem was we kind of put predictive analytics aside. And I think predictive analytics is always going to be
yeah,
powerful. Predictive validity, being able to understand what's going to happen tomorrow, a month from now, next year, with some sort of confidence gives people a leg up in business. And I think being able to execute there is something that I have seen people struggle with mightily for, the last decade or so doing
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
job. And someone I worked with, you and the rest of these folks in this industry, a lot of this comes easy to a lot of people, but that's an anomaly in this space. I find this to be very difficult to execute in the real world
Right.
for people, and that struggle means that people give up prematurely here. The ones who have done it well, these big, massive corporations like the Amazon, who can tell you what you want to look at next, who can, the
At
Spotify's
that
who can,
scale, right? At that
yeah, can
scale, right?
recommend
Yeah.
some music for
Yeah.
you. Oh, these people are now kind of taking over. They've disrupted this
Yeah.
because they've leveraged it. They've made mistakes, but they've executed.
Yeah.
So executing on predictive AI is something that I think we're still missing. It's what I focus on 95% of the time. I do
Right.
use LLMs daily, but most of the value it's from
Yeah.
predictive AI.
Interestingly enough, I hear that from a lot of data and AI professionals, which is, hey, yeah, there's, Gen AI all over the place because it's great at doing certain things.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of the value in the enterprise is still being generated from predictive models, and they don't see anything changing down the road. And in fact, something that you were describing, I have a hypothesis on that. And I have a very confident hypothesis on that, that,
Mhm.
it's the outputs of these predictive models. If you think about it, agents are really well positioned to utilize the outputs of
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
models and almost as decision context to help
Yep.
them make the right decisions on behalf of different personnel in organizations, in businesses. That's
Yep.
really where, because for, to the point you were making earlier, you needed to be really sophisticated to understand how these models worked in order to use the outputs effectively, right?
Yeah.
But if you disintermediate that by having an agent doing that and interpreting and then helping you figure out, okay, what the next step should be, or a series of agents, a series of predictive models and series of agents, it just becomes a much more intelligent decision support system
Let me give you
for
an
users.
example of back in my career, if I knew about agents, what I would have done. If going back to that, when
Yeah,
I was at UTC and I did the churn model, if I knew for person A, their probability of churn was 27%. Now that's high over a time period over the
right,
next 3 months. That's how we modeled it. 27% over the next 3 months. These are the top 5 reasons why this person. So that's all the deterministic output of the
right.
predictive model. Feed that into an agent that is backed by an LLM that says, tell me more about this person, give me the history, give me an intervention plan
Right.
based on what we typically would do. And here's the report. And then you send that out as an agent, via an agent, to management, to their management, or whomever is necessary to help with that intervention. Doing that automatically adds the context that
Yes.
LLMs are really good at. So for me, an agent there on top of a predictive model for sales, imagine in sales, it's like
Yeah.
understanding your audience. What's the probability of an upsell, if you're doing a model like that, or if you're looking to find new leads, what's the probability of a new lead? Put an agent on
Right.
top of that does the same thing, gives you all the context.
Right.
That's going to give you a tremendous amount of power when you have that conversation face to face with a
Yeah,
person.
exactly. And that's what we see some of our leading edge customers doing, which
Yeah.
is they're building these almost like factories of predictive models
Yeah.
and then using agents on top of that, those outputs, to create workflows that are, much more sort of represent what a, really good sort of customer support rep or a really good BDR or salesperson
Yeah.
might be able to do.
Yeah. And The risk of using an LLM there with when the information coming in is deterministic is really helpful because you know
Right.
that you can trust what's coming out. You can
Right.
read it, you're like, okay, this makes sense. I can pivot a little bit. I'm still gonna
Right.
have some oversight on top of this, but yeah,
But
it's
it's
tremendously
not a
powerful.
complete hallucination at that point.
Yeah, it's not
So,
just random. Yeah.
Ben, what advice would you give, both AI leaders as well as business leaders just to stay ahead of the game? I mean, this is the world you live in.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned this earlier, I think before we even started recording, that Jeffrey Hinton mentioned that the capability of AI is doubling every 7 months.
Insane.
I think leaders should be aware and understand that. I am someone who is extremely hopeful about what AI will do in the future, especially in healthcare. There's definitely other areas, but I'm attuned to the healthcare world a little bit more so. For these leaders to understand what exponential growth means when you're doubling that fast. There's an old parable about a king and a person who said, "Pay me in rice and give me one grain of rice on the chessboard, and then every day you double it." By the time he got to 2/3 of the way through the chessboard, he had more rice than there were atoms in the universe.
Right.
That's exponential doubling. We're talking every
Yeah.
7 months.
Right.
Look up that story as a leader and understand what that means. And if you are not working on this today, you will be left behind. I am 100% convinced of that. If Jeffrey Hinton is right, and I'm seeing it, you're seeing it, then if you're a leader and you're not spending your time in this space, you're making a grave mistake. You will
Yeah.
get swallowed up by someone else who did. So maybe that's I don't know what you would call that as a warning shot to folks who are leaders. But some of the other advice I would say is, take some risks. Understand that you're going to make some mistakes. Learn from those and keep feeding that back into these systems. Hire great people, talented people who want to solve problems. We talked about that before. Use the best tech. Don't build your own PostgreSQL database. Get Databricks or Snowflake. Don't build your own models. Get FeatureByte. Get
Yeah.
DataRobot. Don't engineer your own features. Use FeatureByte.
Right.
These are things that for me, it's like, these are no-brainers when I think of it. Sometimes my ability to articulate and galvanize that is a little bit challenging.
I don't see that
But
at
that's my
all.
warning.
Yeah.
Well,
That's your bias, but I don't see that at all just from this conversation.
yeah, no, that's for me is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that
that's kind
makes
of my
sense.
advice.
So last question for you. I mean, I just want to get your honest take on this. Most of the enterprise AI that you're seeing, and we see a lot of it on LinkedIn, which is where everyone
Yeah.
tends to talk about what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Is it closer to theater or closer to transformation?
I would say to answer that question, it's closer to theater right now. And I think there's too many folks who will use that because it builds hype for whatever they're working on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think it's a little bit closer to theater. It's harder to execute. It's harder to execute properly. One of the things I will say is that the people who execute AI the best don't tell you it's AI. It recedes into the background, and all of a sudden you get this magical product
Right.
in front of you. How Spotify recommends the next song or how Amazon tells you what product. They're not saying
Right.
it's built by AI, it's done all this. Obviously they do tout their capabilities in that space. But I do worry if you're spending time and trying to hype yourself up in the AI space. One of the things I think of is what I can do as an applied AI scientist or engineer is not some nebulous promise in the future of what AI can do. I do it now. And I want folks who can do it now and can execute now. So execution, a track record, all of that is really important. And I would be a little bit skeptical, like you said,
Yeah.
you know, that of all the theater that is out there. But here's the other thing, Razi. I'm super excited that there's all that theater.
Yeah.
You know why? Because for the people who can do it, we stand out.
Right. Right.
And the people who can't and all that theater, all that disillusionment that they have with those folks, well, we have this group of folks here who can do it. And I'm like, thank you. If this was so easy, I'm like, I would be worried about my ability to stand out. It's not easy.
Sometimes it feels like it, just given the noise, but you're 100% right. It's ultimately it's the value, and it's, you know, the kinds of outputs and products and applications that get truly operationalized. This is not about vibe coding some app that's just going to die on the vine the third day, but it's, you know, the stuff that lives on and actually adds value. That's really going to be powerful. So
100%. And Andrew Ng talks a little bit about this. He said that the transformation from AI that can solve problems, it used to take, you know, $50 million to make 500 or 100 million or 150 million. Now with the systems that you have right now, you can spend, you know, a fraction of that and start to kind of operate AI in the tail. So he said about a year and a half ago that applied AI engineering is kind of the future. People who can operate in the tail with these little micro problems that can be solved, that may cost you a couple $100,000, but can bring in $500,000 in revenue. Doing that over and over again is going to be key. So kind of moving into the applied AI space, I've always been there.
yeah,
I think more people will start to recognize that. Number one job on LinkedIn, I read this the other day, was like an applied AI engineer or ML engineer. That's the number one most in demand job that they see on LinkedIn.
Interesting. Interesting.
So
not surprising.
This lives on. It's important. It's not surprising.
Yeah.
But finding people who can truly execute here, and you know, and if you do it with the right tech, you can go a lot faster. And yeah,
makes sense. Awesome. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I loved it. Learned a lot. And this would be.
I always enjoy talking to you, Razi. It's
likewise.
been great to catch up. Yeah.